Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. We're so excited to have this conversation with you. And I do have a presentation that I'm going to take us through part of the time, and I also have going to do some stuff on the whiteboard too. Hopefully, you'll be able to see it. I haven't done this before, but I'm super excited about that. And let's see, what are we going to do today? As you know, this conversation is oriented to financial happiness and alleviating financial stress, alleviating money stress. We are going to do that, tackle that a few different ways. And the way that I want you to be thinking about it is kind of like a spiral. So we're spiraling upwards. And what that means is we're going to, like I said, I have a PowerPoint presentation. I'm going to take you through some information about financial stress and just bringing it to mind, because I think it's one of those things that if we can avoid thinking about it, we will, except when we need to today, which is to realize that we want to make some changes in our lives and we want to change the way that we're thinking about money and our relationship with it. And so we'll do the PowerPoint and I'll take you through some information, but then the second pass, I'm going to turn that off and I'm going to use this whiteboard and talk about chakras and talk about the ways that I have found that can really help us in a deeper way. So we're going to take the first pass, which is more superficial, and then the second pass will be deeper. So if you stay with me for an hour, you'll get both parts. If you have to sign off early, we will send a replay of this to everyone. So don't worry, you won't miss anything. We will send this out this afternoon. Couple things. I want to thank Jessica, who's on the call here. Jessica is my co-pilot. We run Wealth Clinic together. Ever so grateful for her and her being here today. And if you have questions or there's something that's confusing to you, she is here to help, because I'm not going to be paying so much attention to the chat, but she'll be helping me with that. And let's see what else. There were so many things that I wanted to share. Just taking a nice big deep breath and bringing yourself into this sacred, beautiful, loving, supportive community that we've created over the past 7 years since my company started. We've been focused on, creating an inclusive, safe, loving, supportive community. And many of you are here and have hung out with us for years. I'm so grateful that you're here. But I just want you to know that you are in a very safe, loving place. And we walk the talk, and hopefully you'll feel that. And one of the things I also wanted to share was, after the presentation and the discussion, we will open it up, and I'm more than happy to answer any questions that are coming up for you. So I can stay late, I don't have to run off. And that might be, hey, can you help me understand like which chakra is kind of creating some grief? Like, I'm happy to answer whatever questions are coming up for you, intuitively or practically or whatever. The other thing is that today I'm talking about, I've actually used a presentation that I was invited to give about a month ago to a large company, and I think we had about 500 people on the Zoom call, and it was very well received. And I wanted to share that with my community. But I also realized that we have a really cool thing happening starting next Monday called Infinite Abundance 2.0. And I will briefly talk about that. And the reason that I want to talk about that is I have not taught this live for 4 years. It is a divine transmission that literally requires me to go into a state of awareness that is not easy for me to do while I run my business. And so it's one of the things that I had to carve out a month where I would be devoting myself to all of you and to the awakening of whatever you're wanting to awaken. I'll talk about that, but it's just an exceptional opportunity. I may not ever do it again because it is such a huge endeavor to kind of shut everything down, my family, my business, and literally be your guide through a deep exploration that literally brought me to writing the Mindful Millionaire book. It's such a gift. And what I can say already is I've been moving into this zone for the past couple of weeks, and talk about a life of abundance. I'm like, why would I ever leave this state of awareness? Because it's so abundant and so beautiful and supportive and loving. And so I'm excited to share that with you. So yeah, so we'll talk a little more about that later. But again, taking nice deep breath and really surrendering into this experience as I pull up my share screen. Okay, I do this all the time and I still can't do it right. Okay, there we go. So the key to financial happiness, alleviating money stress. If you don't know who I am, this is the first time you've ever come and joined us. Thank you for being here. I'm Leisa Peterson. I wrote a book called The Mindful Millionaire, and I focus on helping mostly business owners. Over time, it's evolved, but a lot of business owners to focus on what is it going to take to create more abundance in my life, more abundance in my business. And I have been teaching meditation since 2003, been on a deep spiritual journey for over 20 years. And I'm so, so, so grateful that I have the opportunity to share some of the things that I learn with others, and that it has helped lots of people. If it weren't that, then I wouldn't continue to do this. But because it is helpful and I get great feedback, I keep showing up. And I'm really appreciative of that, because I feel like this is my life purpose. Like, I love my family and I love my my kids and all of those great things, but this is where I definitely feel like I was meant to be. And I'm just so grateful to share some of these discoveries with you today. So let's talk about financial anxiety for just a couple minutes. Like I said, it's important that we remember kind of why we're here and what we're wanting to bust through. And I will give you a little bit of the statistics about financial stress. Finances are a main source of stress and anxiety for lots of people. 69% of Americans 18 and older reported that they have financial worries. No big surprise there. Of the 69%, 25% were worried about not having enough money saved. People of color are also disproportionately affected. A study last year found that 78% of Hispanic Americans and 76% of Black Americans experience financial difficulties compared to their white counterparts. The pandemic, let's face it, it has brought a lot of stress out. Even though there is a lot of money in the system, just because there's a lot of money does not mean that this goes away for many people. Financial anxiety also may affect women more. A lot of the studies show that women have higher levels of money stress than men due to lots of different reasons. Some of it can be the systemic oppression that has occurred in our society, and the way that women are taught about money, the empowerment that women are shown about money, both from the culture and also sometimes from our family structures. But more than anything, I just want you to know that you're not alone with your feelings. You're not alone. Like, I feel like I'm the poster child of financial stress. The reason that I am here talking to you about it is because, I woke up one day, and even though I realized that I was a millionaire, I realized that I had no less stress in my life about money because of that, because of money. Like, it didn't fix the problem. And realizing that it wasn't fixing the problem was a really good teaching at the time for me. I was practicing Buddhism, and it was like, okay, Buddha says that life is suffering. I'm like, but I really want to get out of this, at least with financial stress. And I was like, yeah, but nothing out there, none of the books that I was reading, nothing helped me in the way that I ultimately needed to be helped. And that's what created the portal of the things that I'm going to be sharing with you today. So I'm right there with you. So one of the things that I realized in all the years of work and study, and I worked in the financial services and with people and their money for nearly 30 years, and I see how financial anxiety happens when we're feeling one way, thinking about something else, and doing something completely different. Okay, so our thinking, our doing, and our feeling are not in alignment with each other. And when that happens, that's what causes ultimately this feeling of stress. So being outside of alignment with what's happening. And we're going to dive into these in a little deeper. The first, well, actually, I'll speak to this. 3 things that can help you alleviate financial stress are specifically touching on this feeling, thinking and doing. So the first that we're going to dive into is paying attention to the feelings in your body. And this actually led to ultimately my discoveries around chakras. But what happens for us is the stress that we feel about money, and probably anything else for that matter, is something that we don't want to feel, right? We don't want to feel the stress. And the sad thing about it is that because we're so not in touch with what's happening in our body, the stress continues and we don't break the cycle. And so until we actually understand a safe and helpful way of feeling the feelings, they will keep coming back to us over and over again, like the dog who loves to bring the bone back. You throw it out and then it comes back again and again and again. And that's what we're trying to shake up. The next thing is noticing when you get stuck, because even when we clear out and we start to feel our feelings, we still hit this thing called resistance. And we'll talk a little more about that. And then finally, what I found is because we're so busy with not feeling our feelings, not dealing with our resistance, we don't take action in the things that we know we could do. Like, this isn't rocket science. It's like, if you want more money, it's about earning more, spending less. Like, it's really simple. If that was the problem, we would all have figured it out by now, right? So that's why the doing is at the end. The doing is important, but what we talk about here is something far more deeper, and I think can literally like just change your life forever if it hits into a deep place inside of you that this is the way. And I will also say, from a very practical standpoint, when I first started doing this work, I was dealing with the financial stress, and I wanted that to go away more than I think I cared about having more money. But what I have seen over this past 7 years is that because I was so focused on finding an abundant mindset and being able to live that way and practice it, and also show my clients how to do that, my family, we've more than doubled our net worth in that time. And if y'all saw my tax returns, you'd laugh, because you're like, you're really not making that much money. Like, and I'm really good with tax returns, but you'd be like, how could you have doubled that? And I think that's the magic of abundance that I can't even begin to go into with you today. But I will say that if there's any way for me to say, trust me, this is so, even though I'm very grounded and rooted in the practical, there is a huge magical component to it that you don't get to experience, I think, the level that you want until you're actually implementing it and living it for a bit of time. Okay. I don't teach about instant rewards. They might happen. They're awesome. But I think that can set people up for disaster if you're like, I need an instant reward and it doesn't come, and then you give up on the things that I know will pay off in the long run. So I just want to say that, okay? So we're going to talk about feeling first. And so this is when we get to do a bit of a little workshop here, in that I'm going to invite you to take a moment and think about, what is your biggest source of financial anxiety now? What is the biggest source? I've given you some ideas here. Like, is it not feeling secure with your finances, not being on the same page with a partner, dealing with variable income? So those of us who have our own businesses, we see this up and down and all around. Having a fear of large unexpected expenses, uncertainty about future income. We also see, especially in the Western kind of countries, this challenge of money being tied to self-worth. So if you don't have, maybe you have enough to get by, but it's not as much as other people that you follow, then one of your biggest sources of financial anxiety is you just feel like you're never good enough. It's like it's a direct reflection of your self-worth. It's affecting you that way. And that can cause a lot of financial stress. Or is it something else? And if you're comfortable with it, feel free to share. Jessica, I'm not sure, I'm seeing the chat, but anything you see, and just to give me a few ideas of what's being shared. And it's good because, you know, and yeah, I forgot to say introduce yourself when we first came on, but feel free to introduce yourself and tell us where you're coming in from. And
and there's a lot of uncertainty about the variable income, just the ups and downs of that. That seems to be coming up a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a tough one. Definitely. Yeah. Okay. So with that, I'm assuming everybody's got at least one that you know of, and we're going to go to the next slide. In the next slide, I'm just going to ask you some questions to kind of notice. The first is I want you to notice how you treat yourself around this topic. How do you treat yourself around the thing that causes you the greatest financial stress? Nice big deep breath, maybe a sip of water. Noticing how you treat yourself around this topic. And again, you can share or you don't have to. This is just for you. The other question is, how do you treat others when you get activated about this particular source of financial anxiety? How do you treat others when you get activated? So my husband and I have been together for a really long time. And I promise you, you would know when things are coming up because we both like bicker a lot with each other. We're not as kind to each other when there's financial anxiety occurring, when we make a mistake or something, you know, not pretty. So how do you treat others? And also notice, how does it feel in your body, or where do you feel something in your body? Sometimes we feel it in the head, like an instant headache already just by thinking about it for a second, or in your heart or in your gut. Just notice that. Because again, I'm wanting you to notice, how are these patterns showing up in your life? What's happening as a result of this? Okay. Another big, nice, deep breath. And then I'm going to ask you, if anything were possible, what would you most like to welcome into your life around this thing, this source? If anything were possible, what would you most like to welcome into your life regarding this source of stress? And the next question is, when you are the best possible version of you, who are you? And just notice what comes to mind. Who are you? How does it feel to be you? Best, highest version of you. Who are you? And tuning into that highest version of you, what does this version of you want to put more energy towards? What does this highest version of you want to put more energy towards? Listen to see what comes through. Another nice big deep breath. And the next question is, what's preventing you from doing that right now, if anything? Maybe it's beliefs. Maybe it's always been done this certain way. Maybe it feels like someone else doesn't want to go along with the plan. Just notice what's preventing you from putting more energy towards this source of financial stress. Another nice big deep breath. And I invite you to ask yourself, what are you ready to let go of, if anything? What's ready to go? Maybe it's a belief, a thought, a pattern, a paradigm, maybe something else. What are you ready to let go of? And as it comes to you, I invite you to see if you're ready to give yourself permission in this moment to let go of it. And perhaps you write it down if you haven't already been writing it down. Perhaps you write down what you want to let go of. And when we're done with the call, maybe you tear it up into tiny pieces, you burn it, you have a ceremony. Thank you for serving me. I'm ready to let you go. Just notice what you're ready to let go of and how powerful your intention really is. That you are the creator of your life. And as you tune into what you're ready to let go of and you give yourself permission, even if it's just a belief, a thought, pattern, you're the only one in the whole entire world that could ever do this for yourself. You have all the strings, all the control, because it starts with you. So taking another deep breath and coming back into this space. And I'm going to give you more as we continue about what we can do. Like I said, we're kind of moving on a spiral up. So we'll come back to this feeling space, but I wanted to make sure that we had time to go through these 3 steps so I could introduce them to you. And then we'll go deeper into the feeling and kind of some things I found that can help you even more. But the first kind of takeaway from this conversation is knowing what you're feeling helps you to better understand where your anxiety is coming from. And when we don't understand where the anxiety is coming from, we actually remain powerless to do anything about it. It's so subtle, it's easy to miss it. It's easy to miss just how important it is to understand your feelings. We created a 1-page handout that all of you should have gotten. And I don't know, Jessica, if you have it handy, but that will also give you some ways to kind of revisit these questions that we've given you just now, because that will allow you to go back and do this again and again to uncover the things that you're holding on to, because you can't change the anxiety if you don't know more about it. So that's the first part. The second part is about the thinking. Right? Thinking, the thinking piece of it. And what's interesting about the thinking is it's actually, I'd say, one of the more simple things to uncover, like how we're thinking about something else is the way I think of it. And thinking about something else is kind of the way I explain it is just like what we did kind of very quickly. We move through and we look at, hey, this is the source of the financial anxiety. this is the thing that I'm ready to let go of, or I'm ready to pay attention to, or I'm ready to set some powerful intentions for the new year about changing it. But what often happens for many of us is we resonate with something we want. And the temptation that comes with it is to set a huge goal and try to do everything at once. And sadly, our plans fail because we take on too much at once, and because we hit this thing called resistance. Resistance is a very normal part of our lives, where whenever we're going outside of our comfort zone, there's a really good chance that we're going to hit resistance. Resistance is amazing. It's super sneaky. Even when we think we're really good at overcoming resistance, it's still there. And then we find out later, it's like, oh, the reason I couldn't move forward with that was because I was dealing with resistance. It can stop us in our tracks. It can cause us to procrastinate. It's also one of those things that, again, we look back, if we look back at ourselves, 10 years ago, and we think, if I knew what I knew now, wow, I probably have a lot of money, first of all. But secondly, it's like the things that we wanted to pursue, but we never found time to pursue, probably have a lot to do with resistance coming up that kept us from moving forward. And so I love this analogy. So Nick True is one of the coaches in our Mindful Millionaire collective, who we love dearly. And recently he was telling us that he'd been studying buffaloes. And it was like, this is going to be interesting. And so what he explained to us about buffaloes is, unlike all the other animals in the kingdom, buffalo wait for the storm to cross over the ridge, the crest of the peak of the mountaintop. And as the storm is coming to the buffalo turn and head directly into the storm. So the cows, well, we have that famous saying, I've never seen it done, but like the ostrich puts their head in the sand, right? That's probably some of us. The cows run with the storm. So the cool thing about what the buffaloes do, and this is a great visual for many of us who got the teaching a month or so ago, is imagine if we know that there's something, right, the storm that we're going to have to go through to change our behavior, and we look at it and we head into it, just like what's happening with the buffalo. The buffalo get through the storm far faster, because the cows with the storm, they're kind of running away from it, and the storm stays with the cows as they're running through the fields far longer. And so what I think is a really fun way to think of it is, when we're dealing with resistance in our lives, are we going to think about the opportunity to just take it head on, move into the cloud, move into the difficulty, face our fears, and know that we're going to get through it a lot faster if we approach it that way? Or do we want to play the game of like staying in the storm far longer than we need to? So I love this. Be like the buffalo and mind your resistance. Jay, I know you also were there when you heard that. I'm just going to call on you and see, has that stuck with you? Mm-hmm. No worries.
I have lost my Zoom screen and I have no idea where to find you again. And yes, that I consistently think of that buffalo analogy all the time, that Nick, not only that, but he looks like a buffalo. And and it's so inspiring, and it's a great analogy, because that's what I do. My energy is to just go dive in and continue, and I believe it. I believe I get through it faster because of that.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. So we're all going to be like
see you
again
somehow.
I've had that happen too. I know it happens. And so the last one, we'll dive into this too. So what I'd love you to do, and depending on where the videos are appearing, we're talking about the doing, right? So like, what's next? Like, what could we do? And especially as we think about, again, the end of the year and we're moving into 2022, the final thing I want to talk about with these three is that the only way ultimately even after you felt it and you're facing the resistance, you're still going to have to pick something to work on. And for many of us, there are probably lots of different things. We identified one financial anxiety today that might involve several things on this list or just one. But what I want you to be thinking about is, what is one thing in your life that you could focus more attention and energy on? Do not pick 5, do not pick 3, pick one. And once that one is up and running and moving along and doing what you want, then you can pick another one. So, is it increasing your emergency fund? Is it talking to your partner about money? Is it talking to your kids about money? Is it saving for an important purchase so you don't have to put it on credit? What is one thing that you could do for yourself that will make a difference? And I love this. I love Anne Lamont's book, Bird by Bird. Maybe you've read it, but I'll just remind you of what happens in that book. Is she tells the story of her younger brother, maybe it was like 7 or 8, and he's got to write a book about birds, and it's the night before this report is due, and he's sitting there with all these bird books on the table, kind of trying to figure out how he's going to write this report, and he's crying and he's just having a hard time. And his dad comes in and he says he's like, "Son, it's going to be okay. All you need to do is take it bird by bird, one bird at a time." And I feel like that is exactly what we need to be thinking about as we think about our financial experiences. Like, what's one thing that you could focus on in the new year that would lead you to feeling less stress, more joy, feeling like you have a sense of control on the things that might feel like they're outside of your control? So you're going to pick one thing and you're going to seal it with success by focusing on that thing. For many of us, who are business owners, and Jessica and I talk about this a lot because we do work with a lot of business owners. For many business owners, it's about like the lead generation process or the sales, or like, how am I going to get the revenue more consistently, coming in more consistently. Pick one thing that is going to make a difference and have that be the thing that you're going to focus on, and know that you'll have time to work on the others, because what we've also seen is once you set a powerful intention around money and you move past the resistance and you keep looking at it and you keep working on it, sometimes there may be lots of prayers involved because you're not quite sure where you're going to start. As you begin to gain success, you become a far more powerful person, because you can look back and see where you've come from and where you're headed, and the dent that you made in the things that weren't working for you. Like, you're developing this sense of confidence in yourself. But these 3 things come together quite powerfully to help you in that regard. And so I hope that that's planted a seed of discovery for you and what you can do. And feel free to take a screenshot. We will be sending out a replay, like I said. Let me see if there's something. I wanted to talk, just like we went through the first wave. Now we're going to kind of come back around and go back to the feeling sense. What I wanted to do was talk about some discoveries. And if you've read the Mindful Millionaire book, you still will probably find some interesting things in what I'm about to share with you. But what I was trying to do in the book is show everyone that you could, by becoming more in touch with the chakras, that you could start to unwind the knots and start to help yourself in a bigger way, particularly around financial anxiety and financial stress. But what I'm going to do here is just kind of revisit and solidify why the chakras are so helpful and why they are so powerful and can be in our lives as a tool. So I'm guessing that there are plenty of people that may be new to chakras. So I'm just going to touch on those for a second before I dive in. Here's my picture right there. So the chakras, go back thousands of years. And the way I think about them is like an ancient form of psychology. Like, that's how I look at them. I don't even think that they have to be quite as spiritual as they're made out to. I play with the spirituality of them, but they don't have to be. Like, they can be looked upon just as a form of pure psychology it's like a manual to the human experience. That's how we can think of them. And the way that they roll, right, is starting at the root, going all the way to the crown. The thing that they're covering is an evolution of what happened to us, particularly from the time of, in the womb, all the way to about 26 years of age. You're going through cycles of experiences and feelings that accumulated certain energy and vibration along the way as we were maturing. And what I found in all the hundreds of people that I've worked with, is that different belief structures get held in each of the chakras. And for example, the root is around safety and security. The sacral is around creation, but also this sense of worthiness is the best way that I can kind of encapsulate it in the way that we think about money and chakras. The solar plexus is power. The heart is love and appreciation. The throat is about expression. And the brow is about intuition. Kind of, to me, the brow is like bringing everything together, both our life experience as well as our intuitive guides or guidance. And then the crown at the divine level. So this idea that we're not just this separate, limited, body, and once we die, it's all over, but that there's so much more. So this would be, some would call this God consciousness, divine source. Doesn't matter the words that you use, it's all the same place. It all rolls up to the same thing. And so what was happening is, if our safety was in jeopardy when we were really young, there was a lot of fighting going on in the home. We might not feel safe because there was a lot of violence or violent speech or things like that happening. Or maybe we moved from house to house and we didn't feel safe in the environment that we were living in. Here, this is the center that I often see the most around feelings. So when we really struggle with feeling our feelings, we see it show up here in the sacral a lot. And so if we're noticing that, it's hard for us to get in touch with our feelings, we don't cry easily. That would be another one that's actually a conditioned response rather than a natural response. Tears, there's no perceived energy in tears being bad or good. They just are. But if we have a resistance to tears or to expressing our feelings or to getting in touch with our feelings, that shows up in the sacral. And so it goes like that all the way up. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but each of the chakras contain a whole story of experiences that we've had in our lives that have accumulated in each of those areas. Okay, are you with me? Just checking if there's any questions. Does that so far make sense? Okay, awesome, beautiful. So, what I also want to do is show you. So I've got two pictures here. This picture, you'll notice there's like these dots are gray. They don't have the colors. Here, the colors are just like this. But I want to focus on this for a moment, because this is what's happening to us. And this is what I discovered in my coaching and in the work that I do. I was looking a couple things, and I mentioned in my email today, I had been meditating for many years. So I've been meditating daily for like 22 years. And when I started this company in 2014, I thought it was going to be all about meditation and money. And when I got into coaching people and working with them, I started to notice these patterns of behavior playing out with people in their relationship with money. And after a while, that's ultimately what I wrote about in my book. But I could see these trends, and I could see where people were getting trapped, and then how the problems in each of these areas was translating to people's money experiences. sometimes it was really, really blatant and explicit. And sometimes it was like, they're just all working together. And it wasn't like, I could just say, oh, you're going to have a problem with debt because of this. But it was all over the map. But it was enough for me to be like, holy cow, there is a lot going on here. And that as we unlock and we understand what's happening with the chakras, we can actually heal ourselves. We become way more empowered to take back to bring back the natural vitality that we each and every one of us have access to, but don't have because of the gunk that has gotten stored inside of the chakras. So the way I want to explain it is with a normal situation, in the dull situation, because what happens is instead of these being bright, luminous, colorful energy centers, they're covered with gunk, kind of ethereal gunk, but all of the emotions, all of the trauma, all of the difficulty start to adhere to these ethereal chakras to the point where they're not spinning, where you don't even see the color, that if you tried to tune into them, they would be flat with color. And what happens is every sort of thing that has happened in our lives kind of gets kept as like a storage bank inside the chakras. So after a while, we've got all these bruises, surrounding us, and they're manifesting inside of this. But we can also think of it in even what I'm doing, which is like, we probably all heard of this idea of an aura. Well, the reason that an aura occurs in the energetic field of a human being is because the luminosity of the chakras are spinning very vibrantly. But the more gunk we have from all of our life experiences that basically connect into the different chakras, the more gunk we have, the less spinning that's happening. And then what happens to our human experience is we are living in this protection mode all the time. We have to protect the body, and we have to get what we need for ourselves. This is actually part of the whole societal reason of what we see happening in the world. It's get what you need to get at whatever cost it takes. It doesn't matter if we destroy the planet. It doesn't matter if we oppress other people. It doesn't matter. As long as I get the money, I get what I want, then everything's fine. So when these are shut down, it causes us to think that way. It causes us to act in self-defense rather than love and compassion, or to opportunity, to like what's going on here, right? To see the whole picture. We only see the self-serving, self-defensive approach. We are living lives of constant vigilance. Our nerves and our muscles are tense. Sleep, interesting enough, sleep is the only escape from this. And yet, I've been playing with caffeine recently, like as in getting off of it completely. And it's been such a whole new world of discovery. But what's interesting is coffee and caffeine affects our sleep. But if sleep is the only place that we actually get some freedom from what's happened to us, from all these bruises, it means that sleep is pretty much the most important thing that we can do for ourselves. And yet most people struggle with sleep because of caffeine, the way it affects us, because of the stress that we're holding on to in our bodies. So what also happens, right, is that we're just draining the vitality of our whole entire being. To me, this is why, like, people get cancer. This is why we get sick. This is why we're not able to tap into the regenerative powers of our body and the healing that naturally comes just by being a human being. We don't have access to those tools because of the gunk of what's accumulated through all those events of life that we're holding on to. So that's what I discovered in my coaching, is that that's pretty much what's happening for all of us, one level or another. And I started to try and chronicle, like, well, what would it take to start to have these bruises go away? Like, is that possible? Could we release the bruises? Could we restore ourselves to our natural state of vitality? And that was what I started to discover 4 or 5 years ago when I first offered infinite abundance. What happened was I was like, I want to find a way, because I've been meditating for all this time, and I started to like most people don't see the chakras, because what happens is you're so dulled around the light that you can't even tune in. Well, they're, first of all, they're not colorful, and they're harder to see when they're not colorful. And you need a certain degree of mindfulness to be able to start to see them. And so what started happening for me is the more I tuned into the chakras, I started seeing, and then being able to see what was going on for other people from this other, you know, dimensional reality, if you will. Like I had the intuitive abilities of seeing the chakras. And in the course of that, I started creating these meditations, and I think Infinite Abundance might have been like 2 weeks to start. It was like a week or two. And then I added another week, and then it was 3 weeks. Then ultimately it became a month. But the feedback that I got from the meditations and the process that I constructed to purposefully reactivate, not because I'm doing it for you, but you're learning how to do that cleansing process yourself. By teaching people how to do that, people started coming back to me and they're like, I don't know what's in those meditations, but everything's changing in my life. It was happening physically, it was happening financially, it was happening relationally. And to top off that, it was actually happening sexually. I actually had people, in the first time that I went through this, write to me, multiple people. And I was like, I didn't see this coming. And they're like, I have not had an orgasm in 20 years. And just because of these meditations, it was activating the ability to feel pleasure in the body that had been shut down as a result of trauma. Like I didn't know what I was heading down when this was coming. Like I didn't get guidance that said, go do this. I was like, put one step in front of the other and see what happens. But when I started to get that feedback, I was like, oh my gosh, this works. This helps. This really, really does make a difference in people's lives. And what I want to say about this is, when we restore the vitality of the chakras through exercises, through mindfulness exercises, through journaling, and ultimately through forgiveness, which is the path that all spiritual paths ultimately take us to, this path of forgiving ourselves and forgiving others, so that we can let these little marks go consciously and in some cases unconsciously. Like I found that it's working at both levels. You don't have to have complete conscious awareness. You just have to have the intention that you're no longer going to live a life that is constrained and has less vitality than you know that you're ultimately here to experience. I think it's just making a choice that you're going to get to the bottom of it. But what ends up happening too is, notice how this kind of creates a wall around us. So those of us who are in business, I want you to understand how this affects you with money, especially. So this wall of self-defense, we think we're keeping everybody out from hurting us, but just as much, it's actually keeping the world and the money and all the resources that we've been wanting all our life out too. It's creating a wall of separation from ourselves and from the rest of the world. And so I feel like it's our duty to ourselves to find a way to restore to that vitality, so that we can be this, you know, auric being, that when we walk into the spaces that we present ourselves into, that energy is clear and free and open and loving and compassionate, rather than defensive and protective and restricted because of all that we've been hurt. Like if you've read my book, you know, like I haven't lived a life of ease. Like I've had more trauma than you can imagine. And I think that's also why I'm so passionate about this, because the more trauma we have, the more difficult it can become to feel like you're ever going to get free of it. But I am living proof that that's exactly what happens, that you become this radiating being who can make a big difference in the world, make an impact in the lives of those that are closest to you, and then whoever else you wish to touch, and also be receiving. So what we did in Infinite Abundance is, there's 4 parts to it. The first is just this calibrating, like we need to reach a place of homeostasis, of understanding that this is even happening for us. And so the first week is about this calibrating to like, what are the chakras and what's happening inside of me. Now, it has layers and layers and layers. The process is so gentle that it meets you where you're at. It doesn't like push you to go into something that you're not ready for. But that that process, the first week is just like getting familiar. The second week is about going into each and every one of these to understand how they're playing out in your life, what's happening for you, and where are the blocks and the opportunities for that forgiveness that you're ready to let go of. The third week, which brings me to receiving, which is, I think a lot of times we're motivated by, I want more abundance. The third week is all about understanding how, even if we were to remove all of these, we still have a predisposition to not receiving in the way that's natural to our state of being. Like, as babies, we were totally, right, like helpless. Like, we came into this world receiving, or we wouldn't still be here today. And yet later in life, we can look around our lives and be like, okay, there's been all these things that have happened to me. It's not working out the way I thought. Well, when you, in that third week, what we're wanting you to show you is how big the potential is, or how different it is to start focusing on the action of reception in your life. We also live in a culture that says that famous saying, right? It's better to give than to receive. That's not true. The reason it's not true is if you do that all the time, there's nothing left of you. You need it to be an equal share, giving and receiving, giving and receiving, giving and receiving. And that's how you stay that vital energy that we're talking about here. So in the beginning of that week, it's about receiving, and then eventually it's about expansion of receiving, that you actually have the power of deciding. Because sometimes, let's face it, we're going to go into a retreat for a month, and the goal of the retreat is to go within. I'm not trying to like receive a whole bunch. I'm just trying to receive some very, very specific bits of information so I can be very conscious of it. So what I have found is that it's really incredible when we can be conscious creators of like, oh, I'm doing a launch, or I'm selling something as a business owner. I'm in receiving mode. And then, sometimes I'm like, I'm just kind of in cocooning mode. Like, there's nothing wrong with that, but that you are the one who can decide what that looks like. So the receiving and the expansion of the receiving, or perhaps the shrinking of the receiving. And then finally, the last week is about kind of bringing it all together into this experience of, who are you becoming? What are you taking away from the chakras? How can they continue to help you in your life? But that's kind of, I'm just thinking, in the book, that's the process that I Prosper was inspired by, was, that whole evolution. But with infinite abundance, it's not so much. I think the book has a lot of, financial discussion, a lot of thought involved. What I've also noticed is when you go into this process, it's a feeling-based experience. It's not so much about the head. It's about getting in touch with the feeling sense.